The throne room fell silent as my husband's voice, clear, commanding, and utterly unexpected, rang through the marble halls for the first time in the 3 years I had known him. "Your Imperial Majesty," he said, his words cutting through the tension like a blade, "I come before you not as the mute cripple the Jiang family believed they married their daughter to, but as General Wei Chen, commander of the northern armies, to expose the treachery and corruption that has poisoned one of your noble houses." I stood frozen beside him, my hand still clutched in his, as my mother's face drained of all color. My sister Mei Lin gasped, stumbling backward in her silk robes. My father, the great minister Jiang, looked as though he had seen a ghost rise from its grave. Because my husband, the man they had mocked relentlessly, the broken soldier they had forced me to marry to rid themselves of their worthless daughter, had just spoken. And in speaking, he had shattered every lie, every assumption, every cruel calculation that had defined my entire life. 3 years of silent meals where he communicated only through written notes. 3 years of my family's laughter echoing through our modest home, their visits filled with thinly veiled insults about my unfortunate circumstances. 3 years of wondering if I had been condemned to a marriage as silent as a tomb. But now, standing in the Emperor's throne room with the most powerful man in the empire watching us with keen interest, I understood. Everything had been a test. Everything had been preparation. And my family's day of reckoning had finally arrived. Let me take you back to where it all began, to the moment that set this revenge in motion, though I didn't know it then. I was 20 years old when my mother told me I was to be married. Not with joy or ceremony, but with the same tone she might use to discuss throwing out spoiled fruit. "You'll marry the Wei boy," she said, not looking up from her embroidery. "The one who came back from the northern campaign. The arrangements are made." I had been sitting in the corner of her receiving room, as I always did, present but invisible, useful but unimportant. My sister Mei Lin, 2 years younger and infinitely more favored, looked up from her mirror with a smirk. "The mute cripple?" she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Oh, Yue, how perfect for you." Mother's lips curved in what might have been a smile. Indeed, a suitable match. I said nothing. I had learned long ago that my words carried no weight in this house. I was the eldest daughter, yes, but I might as well have been a servant. While Mei Lin received silk dresses and jewelry, I wore simple cotton. While she took lessons in music, poetry, and painting, I was taught accounting and household management, skills deemed too boring for my precious sister, but necessary for running an estate. While she was paraded at every social gathering as the jewel of the Zhang family, I was left at home or hidden in corners, too plain, too quiet, too unremarkable to enhance our family's reputation. My father, Minister Jiang Weilong, barely acknowledged my existence except when he needed me to copy documents or manage some tedious administrative task. To him, I was a tool, useful occasionally, but certainly not worth his affection or pride. "The Wei family is desperate," my mother continued, still focused on her needlework. "Their son came back from the war 3 years ago, injured. He cannot walk without assistance, and he cannot speak at all, a burden to any family." She finally looked up at me, her eyes cold. "But we can be charitable, and in return, they've agreed to a very modest bride price and will expect no dowry. It solves several problems." I understood immediately. They wanted me gone. Married off to a man no other family would accept, removing me from their household without the expense of a proper wedding or dowry. I would disappear into the Wei family's minor estate, and they could focus entirely on securing a brilliant match for Mei Lin. "When?" I asked quietly. 2 weeks, Mother said. "No ceremony, just a simple family dinner to formalize the contract." Mei Lin laughed, a tinkling sound that once upon a time I might have found pretty. "At least you'll finally be good for something, sister. Taking care of an invalid, it suits you." I bowed and left the room, my heart heavy but my face carefully blank. I had become an expert at hiding my feelings, at swallowing the hurt and humiliation. What choice did I have? The wedding was exactly as promised, brief, cheap, and devoid of joy. The Wei family home was modest but respectable, much smaller than the grand Jiang estate. My new husband was carried in on a chair, his legs wrapped in bandages, his face obscured by a silk veil, apparently a mercy to hide scarring from battle wounds. He did not speak during the ceremony. He did not speak at the dinner. He communicated through his elderly mother, Lady Wei, who seemed kind but resigned to her son's condition. My family barely stayed through the meal. My father handed over a small pouch of coins, my dowry, though it was less than what they spent on Mei Lin's monthly allowance, and left with relief evident on his face. Mother kissed Mei Lin's cheek before they departed, but offered me only a nod. "Take care of him," was all she said. "Try not to embarrass us." And then I was alone in a strange house with a husband I had never seen who could not speak and could barely move. That first night, after the servants had helped him to our chambers and left us alone, I finally removed his veil with trembling hands. The face beneath was not scarred. He was handsome, startlingly so, with strong features, intelligent eyes, and a well-formed mouth that remained firmly closed. His eyes met mine, and I saw something there I couldn't quite name. Not pity, not resignation, something sharper, more aware. He gestured to a low table where paper and brush waited. With effort, he pulled himself from the chair to sit, then wrote in swift, elegant strokes, "I cannot speak. I can hear and understand. We will communicate this way." I knelt beside the table. "I understand," I said softly. "I'm sorry for this arrangement. I know you must have wanted more from a wife." He studied me for a long moment, then wrote, "Did you want more from a husband?" The question caught me off guard. No one had ever asked me what I wanted. "I wanted to be seen," I heard myself say. "See? Just once, as something other than a burden or a tool." His brush moved again. "Then we have that in common." Something in those words, in the steadiness of his gaze, made my throat tight. Here was a man the world had discarded, as it had discarded me. Perhaps I thought we could at least offer each other companionship in our shared exile from the lives we might have had. Over the following weeks, I learned the rhythms of my new life. I managed the household, a skill that proved invaluable as Lady Wei was elderly and the servants needed direction. I learned to read my husband's expressions and gestures, to anticipate his needs. We communicated through written notes, and I was surprised to discover he was educated, witty, and perceptive. He could not walk without support, so I helped him move around the house. His legs seemed stiff and weak, though I noticed he never complained of pain. The servants said his injuries had damaged something in his spine, a miracle he had survived at all. My family visited occasionally, always announced, always just long enough to remind me of my lowered status. "How is your invalid husband?" Mei Lin would ask with false sweetness, her fine robes rustling as she examined our simple furniture with disdain. "Does he drool much? I've heard mute people often do." "He is well," I would reply evenly, "and he does not drool." My mother would inspect the household with critical eyes, always finding something to criticize. "The garden is overgrown, the paint is peeling on the eastern wall. I hope you're not spending all your time coddling that husband of yours and neglecting your duties." I bore it all in silence. What else could I do? But my husband noticed. Every time they visited, I would find a note afterward. The first time it said, "Your sister has the manners of a spoiled cat. Do not let her words wound you." The second time, "Your mother treats you as if you are worthless. This is a lie. I see how you manage this household. You are competent and intelligent." The third time, "Why do you allow them to speak to you this way?" I wrote back, "Because I have no power to stop them. Because I am already the cast-off daughter. What worse could happen if I complain?" His response came after a long pause. "Much worse. And much better. Depending on what happens next." I didn't understand what he meant then. 6 months into our marriage, everything changed, though I didn't realize it at the time. My father visited alone, which was unusual. He barely glanced at my husband, who sat in his chair by the window, before getting to his purpose. "There is a matter," father said briskly, "regarding some land documents. The Jiang family has a claim on a property in the northern province, but the records were damaged in a fire. I need someone to reconstruct them from memory and other sources. You always had a head for such tedious details." What property? I asked. Old farmland, not important to you. His tone made it clear I shouldn't ask questions. Can you do it or not? I can try, but I'd need to see any surviving documents. I'll have them sent over. He was already heading for the door. Have it done in 2 weeks. And Yue? Not a word to anyone about this. Family business. After he left, I found my husband watching me with unusual intensity. He wrote, "Will you do it?" I suppose I must. He's my father. Even when he treats you like a servant? He's always treated me like a servant, I said quietly. This is nothing new. My husband's pen paused over the paper for a long moment before he wrote, "Then do it, but make copies. Keep records of everything." Why? Because I suspect your father is not asking you to reconstruct documents. He is asking you to forge them. The accusation stunned me. He wouldn't he? The characters were sharp, emphatic. A man who treats his daughter with such contempt, who gave you to me thinking I was a broken tool, who never asks about your well-being but only visits when he needs something. What makes you think he values honesty over convenience? I stared at those words, feeling something crack inside my chest. Because he was right. My father had never given me any reason to believe he saw me as anything more than a useful object. And if he was willing to use me to forge land documents? What should I do? I whispered. He wrote quickly, "Do the work, make it look legitimate, but document everything, every source, every reconstruction, every assumption. If he is committing fraud, you'll have proof. And if he isn't, no harm done." And then we wait. And we watch. So I did the work. The documents my father sent were indeed damaged, but enough remained to show what they had once recorded. Except as I studied them, I began to notice discrepancies. The land in question had belonged to a General Wei, granted to him by the emperor 30 years ago for distinguished service. Wei, my husband's surname. The documents my father wanted me to reconstruct changed key details, boundary lines, transfer dates, and ultimately the identity of the rightful owner. If these new documents were accepted, the Zhang family would gain control of what appeared to be thousands of acres of valuable land. Land that rightfully belonged to the Wei family. Land that belonged to my husband. I felt sick. My father wasn't just committing fraud. He was stealing from my husband's family, using me as his unwitting accomplice. The cast-off daughter, married off to a disabled veteran, now being used to rob him. Following my husband's advice, I made the forged documents, but I also made meticulous copies of everything. The original damaged documents, my reconstruction process, the changes my father had requested. I wrote detailed notes explaining every discrepancy. When I gave the finished forgeries to my father, he actually smiled at me, the first genuine smile I could remember receiving from him. "Good work," he said. I knew you'd be useful for something." That night, I showed everything to my husband. The originals, the forgeries, the notes. I watched as he read through them, his face carefully neutral, though his hands tightened on the papers. Finally, he wrote, "Thank you for your honesty." "It's your land," I said. "Your family's land. I won't help them steal from you." "Even though he's your father?" "He stopped being my father the day he decided I was worthless." The words came out bitter, raw. Maybe he never was one. My husband reached out and took my hand. The first time he had touched me beyond what was necessary for helping him move. His fingers were warm and strong, not weak as I had expected. He wrote with his other hand, "Your family has made a grave mistake." "What do you mean?" "They thought I was helpless. They thought you were worthless. They believed they could use us both without consequence." His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw something fierce burning there. They were wrong about both of us. "What are you saying?" He set down his brush and looked at me for a long moment. Then he reached up and slowly, deliberately, undid the bandages around his legs. I gasped. There was nothing wrong with his legs. The skin was unmarred, the muscles clearly strong and healthy. He stood smoothly, effortlessly, with the grace of a trained warrior and stretched like a man who had been confined too long. You I couldn't form words. You can walk. He nodded. Then, to my complete shock, he smiled and wrote, and I can hear perfectly, understand everything, and my mind is quite sound. The silence, however. He tapped his throat and shook his head. Then added, that part is real. For now. I sank into a chair, my mind reeling. You've been deceiving everyone. Why? He knelt beside me and wrote rapidly, 3 years ago, I was poisoned during the Northern Campaign, not by the enemy, by a fellow officer who was taking bribes to sell military information. The poison damaged my vocal cords and was meant to kill me. I survived but was left unable to speak. When I returned home, I realized that everyone believed I was completely impaired. Mind, body, everything. And I realized this gave me an advantage. An advantage? People speak freely around those they think are helpless. They plot and scheme, never imagining the mute cripple might understand every word. I have spent 3 years listening, learning, gathering information. The bandages, the chair, they made people careless around me. But why marry me if you were gathering evidence? His expression softened. He wrote, because my mother was dying and wanted to see me married before she passed. Because your family was so eager to be rid of you that they asked no questions and demanded no proper contracts. Because I saw in their treatment of you the same disregard for honor that I was investigating. He paused, then added, and because when I saw you that first time, hidden in the corner of your mother's receiving room while they discussed me like a piece of unwanted furniture, I saw someone who understood what it meant to be underestimated. Tears stung my eyes. You could have told me. I could have, but I needed to be certain of your character. Needed to know if you were complicit in your family's corruption or a victim of it. He took my hand again. You have proven yourself honorable, intelligent, and kind despite their treatment. I should have trusted you sooner. I'm sorry. I looked at our joined hands, at this man who was nothing like what the world believed him to be, and felt something shift inside me. What happens now? He wrote, now we stop hiding. Now we act. Your father has just given us evidence of his fraud, but it's only one piece of a larger puzzle. I've been investigating corruption in the northern provinces for 3 years. Officials taking bribes, officers selling military secrets, noble families stealing land from veterans, all of it connected. And my family is one of the primary families involved. He met my eyes steadily. Your father has been embezzling from the imperial treasury, using his position as minister to funnel money into private accounts. Your mother has been blackmailing other noble families with fabricated scandals, and your sister has been engaged in fraud, claiming authorship of poetry and artwork created by young women from poor families who she pays to remain silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. How do you know all this? Because they discussed it freely in front of the invalid they thought couldn't understand. Because I've had investigators gathering evidence. Because 3 years of careful patience is about to bear fruit. He stood and pulled me to my feet, his hands steady on my shoulders. I am General Wei Chen. I was a decorated commander before my poisoning, and I have spent these years gathering evidence for the Emperor himself. In 2 weeks, there will be a grand audience where all of this will come to light. The Emperor? I felt dizzy. You're going to expose them before the Emperor? They committed crimes against the Empire and against honorable citizens. Yes, and when I do, I will speak again for the first time in 3 years. His smile was grim. The question is, are you with me? Or do you wish to protect your family despite their crimes? I thought of every dismissal, every insult, every moment of casual cruelty. I thought of how they had used me, married me off like unwanted goods, and then tried to make me complicit in robbing my own husband. I'm with you, I said. What do you need me to do? The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. My husband, General Wei Chen, I was still adjusting to thinking of him by his real title, worked tirelessly, coordinating with investigators, compiling documents, and planning our presentation before the Emperor. I learned that his mother, Lady Wei, had known the truth all along. She had passed away peacefully 6 months into our marriage, satisfied that her son had found an honorable wife. Her elderly frailty had also been somewhat exaggerated. She'd been a shrewd woman who played her part in the deception perfectly. The servants, I discovered, were actually retired soldiers loyal to my husband. They had maintained the illusion of running a declining household while actually serving as guards and assistants in his investigation. Everything I had believed about my new life had been carefully constructed theater. And my family, visiting occasionally to sneer at my reduced circumstances, had never suspected a thing. Chen worked late into the nights, and I helped him organize evidence. We barely slept. During the day, we maintained appearances. He sat in his chair, I brought him meals and helped him move about the house. We communicated through notes. But at night, we were co-conspirators, building a case that would shake the noble houses of the capital. My family visited twice more during those weeks. Each visit was worse than the last. The first time, my mother came with Mei Lin, both dressed in new silk robes. "We've come to tell you the good news," Mother announced, not bothering to sit. "Mei Lin is engaged to be married, to the son of Duke Feng, no less. Imagine our little girl, a duchess." Mei Lin practically glowed with pride. "The wedding will be magnificent. The Duke is sparing no expense. Naturally, you'll be invited, though I understand if you'd rather not attend. It might be uncomfortable for you to see what a proper wedding looks like." "I'm very happy for you," I said quietly, the lie tasting like ash. "The Duke's family has concerns about any possible scandals in our family line," Mother continued, examining her nails. "We trust that you and your husband will remain appropriately inconspicuous. We wouldn't want any associations with disability or poverty to reflect poorly on Mei Lin's prospects." Chen, sitting silently in his chair, didn't react, but I saw his hand tighten on the armrest. "We will be very quiet," I assured them. "Good." Mother finally looked at me directly. "You know, Yue, I was worried when we married you off. Worried you might make trouble or embarrass us. But you've proven adequately compliant. It's nice to know you can follow directions at least." After they left, Chen wrote furiously, one more week, and they will learn what it means to underestimate people." The second visit was from my father alone. He came late in the evening, unannounced, looking agitated. "There's been a complication with the land transfer," he said without preamble. "Some bureaucrat is asking questions about the documentation. I need you to prepare a statement swearing that you reconstructed the documents from original sources, that everything is legitimate." "A sworn statement?" I asked. "Father, if someone is investigating do you presume to question me?" His voice was sharp. "You will do as you're told. Write the statement, sign it with your seal, and I'll handle the rest. This is family business, and you are still a Jiang." I wanted to refuse. I wanted to throw his hypocrisy in his face. But Chen caught my eye and gave the slightest shake of his head. "I'll prepare it," I said instead. After Father left, Chen wrote, "Perfect. He's desperate. That means the investigation is closing in. When you provide that false sworn statement to the Emperor's court, it will be additional evidence of fraud and conspiracy." "You want me to give them the false statement?" "I want you to give them the false statement and then immediately expose it as false with your own testimony. It will show not only your father's crimes, but his willingness to implicate his own daughter in them." I felt a chill. This is really happening. We're really going to do this. He set down his brush and took both my hands in his. Then he wrote with his free hand awkwardly but determinedly. "They tried to bury both of us. Instead, we will bury them." The day of the imperial audience arrived with frightening speed. I dressed in my simplest robes. Chen insisted I appear as I had been forced to live, not as a noble lady. He remained in his chair until the servants carried him to the waiting carriage. To anyone watching, we were simply a sad couple making some obligatory appearance at court. The throne room was magnificent, far grander than anything I had seen before. Golden pillars supported a ceiling painted with celestial scenes. The emperor sat on a raised dais, his dragon robes brilliant in the morning light, his expression neutral but his eyes sharp. Noble families filled the hall, my family among them. Father stood with the other ministers, Mother and Mei Lin in the section reserved for ladies of high rank. They saw us arrive and barely concealed their disdain. Maylin whispered something to Mother, who smiled coldly. They thought we were here as supplicants, I realized. They thought Chen had been summoned as part of the investigation into the land fraud, that we had been called to answer questions as minor players in a scandal. They had no idea. The Emperor's chief minister began reading through the day's agenda: disputes to settle, appointments to announce, petitions to hear. My family looked bored. Around us, nobles chatted quietly, barely paying attention. Then the chaos. Minister announced, His Imperial Majesty will now hear testimony regarding corruption and fraud in the northern provinces. General Wei Chen, commander of the northern armies, has been conducting an investigation at His Majesty's request. General Wei will present his findings. The room went silent. My father's face drained of color. Mother's hand flew to her mouth. Mei Lin looked confused, her eyes darting to where we sat. Chen's servants carried him forward, but as they reached the center of the room, he stood, smoothly, strongly, with the bearing of a warrior. Gasps echoed through the hall. Your Imperial Majesty, Chen said, his voice clear and strong, breaking 3 years of silence like dawn breaking through darkness. I come before you, not as the mute cripple the Zhang family believed they married their daughter to, but as General Wei Chen, commander of the northern armies, to expose the treachery and corruption that has poisoned one of your noble houses. And that's where we began, with my husband's voice ringing through the throne room, with my family's world crumbling, with everything I had endured finally being answered. Chen spoke for over an hour. His voice never wavered. He presented evidence of my father's embezzlement, detailed records of funds diverted from military supplies, of bribes paid to lesser officials, of the land fraud that had drawn me into the web. He showed how my mother had blackmailed at least 7 noble families, threatening to spread false scandals unless they paid her consulting fees. He exposed Mei Lin's plagiarism, bringing forward 3 young women from poor families who she had paid to create art and poetry that she then claimed as her own, using it to build her reputation as an accomplished lady. The Emperor listened without expression as Chen laid out a case built over 3 years of investigation. When he finished, Chen turned and gestured to me. My wife, Lady Wei Yue, has additional testimony. She was used by her family as an unwitting accomplice in their crimes, but when she discovered the truth, she chose honor over blood. My legs trembled as I walked to the center of the room. I held the folder Chen had prepared for me, copies of everything related to the land fraud, including my father's instructions to forge the documents. Your Imperial Majesty, I began, my voice smaller than Chen's but steady. My father asked me to reconstruct land documents that he claimed had been damaged. He told me it was simple family business, but as I worked, I realized he was not asking me to reconstruct. He was asking me to forge. I presented the documents, explained the discrepancies, showed how the original deeds proved the land belonged to the Wei family. My father tried to interrupt, but the Emperor's guards moved to flank him, and he fell silent. My father then asked me to provide a false sworn statement supporting his fraud, I continued. He threatened me with family shame if I refused. He was willing to implicate his own daughter in his crimes to protect himself. This is absurd, my father finally burst out. She's confused. She doesn't understand. Minister Jiang, the Emperor said, his voice quiet but absolute in its authority. You will remain silent. My father's mouth snapped shut. I continued, detailing every interaction, every moment where my family had used me. And as I spoke, I felt something lifting from my shoulders. Every humiliation, every dismissal, every moment where I had swallowed my hurt and pretended it didn't matter, I was finally giving voice to all of it. Not with anger, not with tears, but with facts, with evidence, with truth. When I finished, the Emperor studied the documents for a long moment. Then he turned his gaze to my father. Minister Jiang, you have been a member of this court for 20 years. I trusted you with significant responsibilities. The Emperor's voice was cold. But you have betrayed that trust utterly. You have stolen from veterans who served this empire. You have embezzled from the imperial treasury. You have used your position to enrich yourself at the expense of honorable citizens. Your Majesty, please, I can explain. You will have the opportunity to explain to the magistrates in prison. The Emperor gestured to his guards. Take him. My father was seized, still sputtering protests as he was dragged from the hall. The Emperor's gaze moved to my mother. Lady Jiang, your crimes of blackmail and extortion are equally serious. You will join your husband in custody pending trial. Mother didn't protest. She simply stared at me with such venom that I actually stepped back. But the guards were already escorting her out. Finally, the emperor looked at Mei Lin, who had gone white as snow. Miss Jiang, while your crimes are less severe than your parents', they are still serious. Plagiarism and fraud against those who trusted you. More than that, you benefited from your family's corruption while belittling those who suffered from it. I didn't know, Mei Lin cried. I didn't know what they were doing. Perhaps, the emperor said, but you knew how they treated your sister. You participated in that cruelty eagerly. You mocked a decorated general and his wife. You took every advantage your family's corruption provided and never questioned its source. What will happen to me? Mei Lin whispered. Your engagement to Duke Feng's son is dissolved effective immediately. Your family's titles and properties are forfeit. You will be sent to a remote monastery where you will live in reflection on your actions. The emperor's voice was final. Perhaps humility will teach you what privilege did not. Mei Lin was led away, sobbing. The emperor then turned to Chen, and his expression softened slightly. General Wei, your service to the empire continues to exceed expectation. Not only did you survive an assassination attempt and continue your duties, but you conducted an investigation that has exposed corruption at the highest levels. I am grateful. Chen bowed deeply. I serve at your majesty's pleasure. The land stolen from your family will be returned, along with compensation for 3 years of illegal occupation. Additionally, your family's original estate in the capital will be restored, the one that was sold to the Zhang family 15 years ago through what we now know was fraud. I gasped. The Zhang family estate, my childhood home, had belonged to the Wei family? It seems, the emperor continued, that the Zhang family's rise to prominence was built largely on stealing from a general who was fighting for the empire on distant borders. This injustice is now corrected. He turned to me. Lady Wei, you showed remarkable courage in exposing your family's crimes. You could have remained silent, could have protected them out of misplaced loyalty. Instead, you chose honor. For that, you have my respect. I bowed, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. The Zhang family's remaining assets will be liquidated to compensate their victims. What remains will be held in trust for Lady Wei, as she is their only innocent member. The weeks following the trial passed in a blur. My father and mother were sentenced to 15 years of hard labor. Mei Lin was sent to the remote monastery as promised. The Duke's family publicly denounced their former association with the Jiangs. Chen and I moved into the restored Wei family estate, the place that should have been his all along. It was grand, beautiful, and felt strange after the modest house we had shared. One evening, about a month after the trial, I found Chen in his study. He was no longer pretending to be mute, but he was still a man of few words. When he spoke, it was with purpose. Are you all right? He asked as I entered. I sat across from him. I keep thinking about them, my family. I know they deserved what happened, but they were still your family, he finished. And no matter how they treated you, there's grief in losing them. Is that weak? I asked. To feel sad for people who hurt me? It's human. He set down his brush. You know, I could have exposed them 2 years ago. I had enough evidence even then. Why didn't you? Because I wasn't sure yet if you were complicit or a victim. And because... He paused. Because I had come to care about your well-being. I wanted to be certain that when everything came crashing down, you would not be destroyed in the wreckage. My throat tightened. You protected me. I tried. I also tried to build a case so thorough that no one could claim you were involved in their schemes. The land fraud actually helped. It was the perfect way to prove your innocence while exposing their guilt. You used them against themselves, I said. They used you your entire life. Turnabout seemed fair. He reached across the desk and took my hand. Yue, I need to tell you something. Our marriage, it began as convenience and strategy. But it has become something else, at least for me. My heart began to race. What do you mean? I mean that somewhere in the past year, I stopped seeing you as a useful ally and started seeing you as someone I wanted to share my life with. Not because circumstances forced us together, but because I choose to. He held my gaze. I'm not good with words, even now that I can speak. But I want you to know that you are valued. You are seen. You are worthy of every good thing. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. I never thought anyone would say such things to me. Then everyone else was a fool. He came around the desk and pulled me to my feet, into his arms. You are brilliant, capable, and kind, despite every reason not to be. You saved me as much as I saved you. I buried my face in his chest, letting myself cry for the first time since the trial. For the family I had lost and never really had, for the years of hurt, for the relief of finally being free, and for the strange, unexpected joy of being chosen by someone who saw my worth. What happens now? I asked eventually. Now? Chen smiled. Now we live, we rebuild, we help others the way we helped each other. He brushed tears from my cheeks. And we do it together, as equals, because that's what we always should have been. 6 months later, our household had found its rhythm. The estate ran smoothly under my management. Those years of being trained to handle tedious details had turned me into an excellent administrator. Chen had been officially restored to his command of the Northern armies, though he spent most of his time in the capital training younger officers and advising the emperor. We received word occasionally about my family. Father had been transferred to a work camp in the mountains. Mother had fallen ill in prison and was recovering slowly. Mei Lin had written me one letter, not apologizing exactly, but acknowledging that her life in the monastery was teaching her things she had never understood before. I didn't write back. Perhaps someday I would. But not yet. The Wei family estate became known as a place where justice could be found. Chen used his restored influence to help other veterans who had been cheated, other families who had suffered from corrupt officials. I established a fund to support young women from poor families, women like those Mei Lin had exploited, giving them opportunities to showcase their talents without being used. One afternoon, I was reviewing applications for the fund when Chen entered my study. There's someone here to see you, he said. Someone from your past. My stomach tightened. Who? Aunt Lin, your mother's older sister. I remembered Aunt Lin vaguely, a quiet woman who had visited when I was very young, but who I hadn't seen in years. What does she want? To apologize, apparently, and to explain. Aunt Lin was older than I remembered, her hair streaked with gray, her face lined but kind. She bowed deeply when I entered the receiving room. Lady Wei, thank you for seeing me. Please sit, I said, gesturing to a chair. She sat, hands folded in her lap. I don't deserve your kindness. I should have intervened years ago. What do you mean? I knew how your mother treated you. I knew your father was corrupt. I said nothing. She looked up, tears in her eyes. I was a coward. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that surely someone would notice and help you, but no one did. And I did nothing. I sat back, processing this. Why are you here now? Because when I heard what happened, as how you exposed them, how you had suffered, I realized I had to at least try to explain. She took a shaky breath. Your mother was the favorite daughter in our family. Everything came easily to her. I was overlooked just as you were. When I saw her treating you the same way our mother treated me, I should have stopped it. Instead, I said nothing, because part of me thought you deserved better advocates than I could be. You thought I deserved better than being helped by someone who was also overlooked, I said slowly. Yes, how terrible is that? I thought my help would be worthless, so I gave none at all. I studied her, this woman who had watched my suffering and done nothing, who was now here asking for, what? Forgiveness? Understanding? I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. You were an adult. You had the power to help and chose not to. I know. She didn't look away. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking if there's anything I can do now to make amends. I thought for a moment. There are girls in situations like mine. Girls who need advocates. Not just money or resources, but people who will speak up when they see injustice. I met her eyes. If you truly want to make amends, help them. Be the person you weren't for me. She nodded slowly. I can do that. After she left, Chen found me standing by the window, lost in thought. That was generous of you, he said. Was it? I basically told her to atone by helping others. You gave her a path forward. You could have sent her away with nothing. He stood beside me. You're not like them, Yue. You never were. I had good teachers, I said, taking his hand. People who showed me that being underestimated doesn't mean being worthless. We taught each other that, he corrected. A year to the day after the trial, Chen and I hosted a dinner at the Wei estate. It wasn't a grand social event. We had little interest in those. Instead, we invited people who mattered, veterans Chen had served with, young women from the fund, officials who had helped expose corruption. Aunt Lin came too. She had been working with the fund for months, mentoring young women and advocating for them with their families. She wasn't family to me, not anymore, but she was becoming an ally during the Bamasum. Dinner, Chen stood and raised his glass. His voice, once thought lost forever, rang clearly through the room. 3 years ago, I was poisoned by a traitor. I lost my voice but gained perspective. I learned that silence could be a weapon, that patience could be power, and that the people the world overlooks are often the ones who change it. He looked at me. I learned that a woman dismissed as worthless by her family could be the bravest, most honorable person I would ever know. I felt tears prick my eyes as he continued. Many of you in this room have been underestimated, overlooked, told you were less than you are. But you're here now and you're thriving. Not because someone gave you permission, but because you took your power back. He raised his glass higher. To those who were underestimated, may they always exceed expectations. The room erupted in cheers and applause. I stood and went to Chen's side, and he put his arm around me. Did you write that speech? I asked quietly. You edited it 3 times, he reminded me. We made it together. Later that night, after everyone had gone and the servants had cleared the dishes, Chen and I walked through the gardens. The moon was full, casting silver light over the carefully tended paths. Do you ever think about what your life would have been like? I asked. If you hadn't been poisoned? Sometimes, he admitted. I would have continued commanding armies, winning victories, being celebrated. I would have married someone from a prominent family, had a conventional life. Do you regret what happened? He stopped walking and turned to face me. Not for a single moment. That life would have been comfortable, but it would have been hollow. I would never have met you. I would never have learned what I learned. I would never have become who I am now. A man who pretended to be helpless for 3 years? A man who learned that real strength isn't always loud or obvious. A man who found a partner who sees him as he truly is. He cupped my face in his hands. Yeah, I would go through everything again. The poison, the pain, the silence, if it meant ending up here with you. I kissed him then, in the moonlit garden, surrounded by peace we had fought for. When we pulled apart, I said, I used to think I was just surviving, just enduring until something changed. I never imagined I could be happy. Are you? Happy? I looked around at the beautiful estate that was now our home, at the garden we had planned together, at the future we were building. Yes, For the first time in my life, I'm genuinely happy. Good, he said, because you deserve it. You always did. News reached us a few months later that my father had died in the labor camp. He had fallen ill and, with his weakened constitution from years of comfortable living, had not recovered. My mother was released from prison on compassionate grounds, her health broken. She went to live with a distant cousin in Pum, the provinces far from the capital and the life she had once commanded. Mei Lin remained in the monastery. According to the abbess, she was learning humility, though whether it was genuine transformation or simply compliance was unclear. I felt nothing when I heard about my father's death. Or perhaps it was more accurate to say I felt the absence of feeling. No grief, no satisfaction, no relief. Just acknowledgement that a chapter had closed. Chen held me that night anyway, understanding without me having to explain that sometimes the absence of feeling is its own kind of burden. You don't have to feel anything in particular, he said quietly. There's no correct way to grieve people who hurt you. I keep thinking I should feel something, I admitted. Sadness, or vindication, or anything. Maybe you grieved them long ago, when they made it clear you didn't matter to them. The truth of that settled into my bones. I had grieved the family I wanted, the father who could have loved me, the mother who could have protected me, the sister who could have been my friend. I had grieved all of it years before they were actually gone. You're right, I said. I let them go a long time ago. Then don't let anyone tell you how you should feel now, he said. You've earned the right to feel however you feel, or don't feel, without judgment. 2 years after the trial, the emperor summoned us to court again. Chen and I exchanged glances as we dressed in our formal robes. Was there new corruption to address, another investigation? But when we entered the throne room, the atmosphere was different. Celebratory, almost. The emperor smiled, actually smiled when he saw us. General Wei, Lady Wei, thank you for coming. We bowed deeply. The investigation you conducted continues to bear fruit, the emperor said. 7 more corrupt officials have been exposed. 3 military officers involved in selling secrets have been captured. And the reforms you suggested for protecting veterans' rights have been implemented across the empire. Your Majesty is too kind, Chen said. I am merely just. The emperor gestured to an aide who brought forward a silk-wrapped bundle. General Wei, for your continued service and your dedication to justice, I restore to your family all titles and lands that were taken. Additionally, I appoint you as Minister of Military Justice, overseeing the treatment and rights of all soldiers in the Imperial Army. Chen bowed again, accepting the appointment with grace. The emperor then turned to me. Lady Wei, your intelligence and courage prevented a grave injustice. But more than that, the fund you established has helped dozens of young women escape exploitation and achieve independence. Your work in reforming how noble families treat their less favored children has brought needed attention to a systemic problem. I bowed, surprised. I hadn't realized the emperor was aware of my work. Therefore, it continued, I appoint you as an imperial advisor on family welfare and women's rights. You will have authority to investigate complaints of family abuse and recommend reforms to protect vulnerable family members. I looked up sharply. Your Majesty, I'm honored, but I have no formal training for such a role. You have lived experience and proven wisdom. That is worth more than any formal training. The emperor's expression was serious. Use your voice to help those who have none. You understand their situation better than anyone. Chen squeezed my hand, and I understood. This was more than an appointment. This was validation. This was the emperor himself saying that my suffering had not been for nothing, that my survival had purpose, that my worth was recognized at the highest levels of power. I accept, I said, my voice steady, and I will serve with honor. 5 years after my marriage, Chen and I sat in our private garden watching the sunset. We had both returned from a long day, him from training exercises with young officers, me from meetings with families seeking help with internal disputes. Tired? He asked. Exhausted, I admitted, leaning against his shoulder, but satisfied. How many cases today? 3. 2 were resolved with mediation. The third, I sighed. The third required me to remove a young girl from her home. Her stepmother was treating her the way my mother treated me. Where is she now? Staying with a family friend while we investigate formal guardianship. She'll be safe. I looked up at him. Do you ever think about how differently things could have gone? If you had exposed my family earlier, if we had never married, if any number of details had changed? Sometimes, he said. But I try not to dwell on alternate paths. This is the path we're on, and it's a good one. It's better than good, I said. It's more than I ever imagined possible. A servant approached with a message. Chen read it and smiled. What is it? I asked. Mei Lin has requested permission to leave the monastery. She wants to open a school for girls from poor families, teaching art and poetry. I sat up. Mei Lin? The same Mei Lin who plagiarized art from poor girls? Apparently, the abbess believes she has changed. She's been working with local children for the past 2 years, teaching them for free. The abbess vouches for her sincerity. I didn't know what to feel. What does she want from us? Advice, and possibly funding, though she says she'll understand if we refuse. What do you think? Chen considered. I think people can change. I think 5 years of genuine reflection might have taught her what a lifetime of privilege didn't. But I also think you're the one who should decide whether to help her. I thought about my sister, spoiled, cruel, thoughtless, and tried to imagine her as a teacher, as someone dedicated to helping others. It seemed impossible. But then again, 5 years ago, who would have imagined me as an imperial advisor? Let her come to us, I said finally. I want to hear what she has to say. If she's truly changed, I'll consider helping. If she hasn't, well, at least we'll know. Mei Lin arrived 2 weeks later. She was thinner than I remembered, her face bare of makeup, her clothes simple and worn. She looked like I had looked when I first married Chen, overlooked, diminished, unimportant. She bowed deeply when she saw me. Sister, thank you for seeing me. Sit, I said, gesturing to a chair in my study. She sat, hands folded primly, eyes downcast. Nothing like the preening, confident girl she had been. Speak, I said. Tell me why you think I should help you. I don't expect you to help me, she said quietly. I don't deserve it. I came because the abbess said I should face what I've done, acknowledge it fully before moving forward. Then acknowledge it. She looked up and I saw tears in her eyes. I was cruel to you, I mocked you, belittled you, participated in mother and father's treatment of you without question. I thought I was better than you, prettier, more talented, more valuable. I thought the world owed me everything and you nothing. Why? I asked bluntly. What did I ever do to you? Nothing. That's the worst part. You did nothing to me. You existed, and that was enough for me to treat you terribly. She swallowed hard. Mother and father raised me to believe I was special, that I deserved more than others. They showed me that you were disposable, and I accepted that as truth. I never questioned it. And now? Now I've spent 5 years with women who have nothing, women whose families cast them aside for being born female, or for not being pretty enough, or for having opinions. Women like you were. She wiped at her eyes. I taught them art because that's all I knew how to do. And I realized that everything I had claimed as my talent, I had stolen from women just like them. The abbess says you've been teaching for free for 2 years. Yes. At first it was assigned as penance, but then... She smiled slightly, sadly. Then I realized I liked it. I liked helping them discover their own voices. I liked watching them create beauty and knowing I had facilitated that instead of stealing it. For the first time in my life, I was doing something that mattered. I studied her, looking for signs of deception, of manipulation. But all at see, I saw was genuine remorse and an exhausted kind of hope. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Permission," she said simply. "Permission to try to make amends even though I never can fully. Permission to exist in the world without your hatred, even if I can never have your love." She paused. "And if you were willing, advice on how to start a school. You've been helping women for years now. You would know what they need." Chen, who had been sitting silently in the corner, spoke up. "Why a school? Why not just continue at the monastery?" "Because the monastery can only help so many, and because—" Mei Lin looked at me directly. "Because I want to be the kind of person who builds something good instead of destroying it, like my sister has done." The word sister from her lips felt strange. We had never been real sisters, despite our blood. "If I help you," I said slowly, "it comes with conditions. You will not take credit for others' work. You will pay your teachers fairly. You will create a place of genuine learning, not a vanity project to rebuild your reputation." "I agree to all of that," she said immediately. "And," I continued, "you will work with my fund to ensure that girls from poor families have priority for enrollment. This school will exist for them, not for the daughters of noble families looking for accomplishments to list." "Yes, absolutely." I looked at Chen, who gave me a slight nod. "The decision is yours." "I will provide funding and advice," I said finally. "But understand this, I am not doing this for you. I am doing this for the girls you will teach. If at any point I believe you have returned to your old ways, the funding stops immediately." Mei Lin bowed her head. "Thank you. I won't disappoint you." "Disappoint me?" I shook my head. "Mei Lin, you've already disappointed me more than I can measure. Don't avoid disappointing me. Aim to help the students. If you do that, nothing else matters." After she left, Chen came to stand beside me at the window, watching her walk away. "Do you believe she's changed?" he asked. "I believe she's trying to change. Whether she succeeds—" I shrugged. "Time will tell. But giving her a chance to try costs me little and might help many." "You're more generous than I would be." "No," I said. "I'm just practical, and maybe—" I paused, considering. "Maybe I understand that people can be trapped by their circumstances just as much as I was. She was raised to be selfish and cruel. I was raised to be meek and accepting. We both had to break free of what we were taught." "The difference is you broke free without hurting anyone," Chen pointed out. "True, but I also had you helping me. She has no one." I turned from the window. "I don't forgive her. I may never forgive her, but I can give her the chance to build something better than what she was." Chen pulled me into his arms. "This is why the Emperor made you an advisor. You see clearly without letting bitterness cloud your judgment." "I learned from the best," I said, thinking of those 3 years of marriage where Chen had taught me, through patience and example, how to be strategic without losing myself. 10 years after the trial that changed everything, I stood in the gardens of the Wei estate during a celebration. Chen had just been promoted to Grand General, overseeing all imperial armies. The fund I had established had grown to serve women across the empire. Mei Lin's school was thriving, with branches in 3 provinces. Aunt Lin found me by the koi pond, both of us watching the sunset paint the water gold. "Your mother died," she said quietly. "Last week, in the provinces, peacefully, in her sleep." I absorbed this news without shock. Mother had been ill for years, her health broken by imprisonment and exile. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Will you mourn her?" I considered the question honestly. No, I mourned the mother I wished I had years ago. The woman who died was a stranger to me. Aunt Lin nodded. "I mourned my sister long before she died too. The one I knew in childhood before she became what she became." "Do you regret it? Helping me now after failing me then?" "Every day," she said frankly. "But I'm grateful you let me try to make amends even partially." A servant approached and informed me that the emperor had arrived. I straightened my robes and went to greet him, Chen appearing at my side as if summoned. The emperor had aged in the past decade, but his eyes were still sharp. He greeted us warmly. We had become trusted advisors, almost friends over the years. I have news, he said after the formalities. I am establishing a new ministry, the Ministry of Family and Social Justice. It will oversee family welfare, women's rights, and protections for vulnerable citizens. He smiled at me. Lady Wei, I would like you to serve as the first minister. I felt Chen's hand tighten on mine in surprised support. Your Majesty, I said carefully, such a position would require someone with personal experience, proven judgment, and the trust of both the common people and the noble houses. You have all of that. The emperor's expression was serious. In 10 years, you have changed how this empire treats its most vulnerable citizens. You've given voice to the voiceless. I can think of no one better suited to lead this work. I looked at Chen, who nodded encouragingly. Then I turned back to the emperor and bowed. I accept, Your Majesty, and I will serve with all the dedication I have. I know you will, he said. Hey, you always have. 15 years after I married a man who never spoke, I sat in my ministerial office reviewing a case that echoed my own past. A young woman whose family had cast her aside, married her off to a supposedly disabled veteran to rid themselves of burden. But this time, the veteran actually was disabled, and the girl was being abused by his family, who saw her as an unpaid servant. I drafted orders for her removal for an investigation into the veteran's family for support to be provided. Then I sent a personal note to the girl, carried by one of my most trusted assistants. The note read, "You are not alone. You are not worthless. Help is coming. Hold on," the same words I had wished someone had said to me all those years ago. That evening I returned home, to the beautiful estate that had once been stolen from Chen's family and was now rightfully ours, to the gardens we had planted together, to the life we had built, from the ashes of betrayal and underestimation. Chen was in his study, as always, working late. He looked up when I entered and smiled, that rare, genuine smile he reserved only for private moments. Long day? He asked. Long, but good, I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. I helped someone today, someone like I was. Did you tell them your story? No, but I will when she's ready to hear it. When she can understand that survival is possible, that justice exists, that being underestimated can become your greatest advantage. Chen set down his brush and came around the desk, pulling me to my feet and into his arms. Do you know what I love most about you? What? You could have become bitter, vengeful, cruel. After everything they did to you, no one would have blamed you. He brushed hair from my face. But instead, you became kind, strong, just. You turned your pain into purpose. I had help, I said, pressing my forehead to his. I had you. We had each other, he corrected. Two people the world tried to discard who refused to be discarded. Do you think about them anymore? My family? Sometimes, he admitted. Not with anger anymore. More with curiosity about how differently things might have gone if they had simply been decent people. They would have a daughter who loved them, I said. A son-in-law who respected them. Grandchildren, eventually. A family that was actually a family. Instead, they have nothing, and we have everything. I looked around his study, our study really, as I used it as often as he did, at the maps and papers and books, at the signs of work that mattered, of lives being improved, of justice being served. Yes, I agreed, we have everything. Later that night, lying in bed with Chen's arm around me, I thought about the girl I had been. 20 years old, unloved, underestimated, married off to a man everyone believed was broken. I thought about how terrified I had been, how certain I was that my life was over before it truly began. And I smiled in the darkness, grateful that girl could not have known what I knew now, that sometimes the moments we think are endings are actually beginnings. That being underestimated is only a disadvantage if you believe it yourself. That the family you choose matters more than the family you're born to. That a man who never spoke could change your entire world with a single moment of breaking his silence. Chen stirred beside me. Can't sleep, he murmured. Just thinking. About? About how glad I am that you married me, I said honestly. He pulled me closer. I am the fortunate one. I married a woman everyone thought was worthless, and she turned out to be the most valuable person I've ever known. We saved each other, I said. Yes, he agreed, his voice already fading toward sleep. Yes, we did. And in the quiet of our shared room and the peace we had fought for, I finally let myself believe it. Not just in words, but in the deep certainty of my bones. I was valuable, I was seen, I was loved, and I had won.